Well, this is a bit of a different episode for several reasons. It's our 100th episode and we have a live audience with us today. Slightly nervous about it, although we can't see them, so that's a benefit. And we are on video as well as audio today. So any of you that haven't listened to the last 100 episodes, I'm Sarah Canning from the Property Marketing Strategy.
I'm Dan Smith from Resi Consultancy and Verbaflow AI.
And I'm Deanie Lee from the Property Marketing Strategists.
And we are recording from the Laughing Aloud studio in Soho, surrounded by the people who have made this podcast what it is for the past 2 years and some of our most loyal listeners. And we may cut to some live questions as well. So some of our live audience, you're welcome to WhatsApp us the questions and we may or may not answer them. So I thought for this episode, let's go all the way back to February 2024 and where this all started. We've all listened to the first episode again. We were cringing a little bit because we couldn't remember what it was like and what the content was. But I was actually pleasantly surprised. We weren't as bad as I thought we were.
Agreed.
It was really good. I was really surprised. And I think, to be fair, Gareth, our editor, sitting there, takes a lot of the credit for that. But yeah, it was quite a hard-hitting episode, that one. We started with a bang, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, what did we set out to achieve and have we done it? That was what I was kind of tuning into when I was listening back to it. So one thing that we said is we wanted to make the conversations public that are usually done behind closed doors. We keep saying that we expose the elephants in the room, the realism of the sector, being transparent. And we said that we could do this as we were independently positioned as consultants. And the benefit to us professionally is that it's forced us to stay on top of sector news, which in turn benefits our own consultancy practices and our clients as well. So do you think we have done that? Have we continued to do that in over 100 episodes?
Yeah, I do. And I think, do you know what, it's been levelled at us, I think, like, oh, hang on a minute, you're not impartial or whatever. Well, we're independent, but we're consultants and we're commentators on the sector. So if you're expecting us to be the BBC, that's absolutely not what we are. We've got opinions and quite a lot of them. They're not always going to be popular, but I think that's what the sector was crying out for. A bit of, dare I say it, personality for people to actually put their head above the parapet and really talk about what the challenges are, what the best practice as well, and how if things are going well, call that out too. But I think it's we've done a good job, dare I say it, patting ourselves on the back of actually being transparent, being very open, talking about some of the challenges in particular, and what's going on in the state of the industry. And it's not just student housing. I think that's one of the key things. We'll come on to the word cloud that you've pulled together, Sarah, later on. And I think it's starting to, there's more BTR, there's more co-living, there's more later living and single family housing as well. And I think it's been really eye-opening for us with our consultancies as well, and of course me with Verbaflow too, to see how some of those other sectors respond. So yeah, I think we've achieved our goals.
And I think that is the beauty of it. I think if you had a podcast that was, and there's lots of podcasts out there that are run by corporations, but you've still got to toe the party line because obviously you have to, because you're working for a corporation. And I think that's where we don't have to. We can have opinions. So yes, we're not independent and we have opinions, but we have opinions that are true and real and transparent. And I think that is hopefully part of the reason why people keep listening. And I think we have stuck to that. I think we have always tried to say what we feel and what we think and what's going on and our reality of the situation. And that is hopefully refreshing for listeners to hear.
I think one of the other things that we set out to do that I think we have done, and we have a live audience here who will quickly tell us if we haven't, but it's that kind of connecting the dots between shared living and real estate and the built environment. And I think, like you said, Dan, we've kind of brought those sectors together. We talk about all of them, but it means that people are having conversations kind of less in silos, really, that shared living, the BTR, PBSA, university living, later living, it's all part of a wider real estate and built environment network. And hopefully the conversations that we have weekly kind of, knit all of those together.
It definitely connects the dots. I think that's what we've found. And yes, of course, a lot of our experience is PBSA or student housing in general, but HMO sector as well. And we know that we have BTR and co-living as the so-called shadow market now too. So, taking a lot of students, but it's more how can those sectors also stand on their own 2 feet in their own rights. And we're starting to see that a lot more now. So, being able to talk about that with authority, I think is key. But we're learning it every week, and I think being able to talk about it with a reasonable amount of authority and credibility does help. But I think primarily just talking about it, like it's starting conversations, and I think that's what we've all been quite good at.
Somebody said, and I can't remember who it was, so apologies, that they like the fact that with the podcast we kind of give people ideas and things to look into. We're not preaching to them what to think or how to think or what to do. We just kind of land some topics, and the audience can do what they want with that. And I guess based on that, when we were listening to the first episode, we started off by talking about events that we'd been to recently, which is a theme that we've continued over the past couple of years. And I guess we count ourselves really lucky that we get invited to lots of events because organisers recognise that we can talk about their events in front of people who maybe wouldn't usually attend, or share the content with people who maybe did attend but haven't shared that content with their colleagues. So in that first episode, we talked about events that we had been to. Interestingly, I picked up that I think it was an event that you went to, Deanie, that they said the real estate sector had reached the bottom, but the curve is on the way up. So that didn't date well.
I don't think we knew about Trump back then.
No, possibly not. And we also, interestingly, discussed challenges in recruiting into the construction industry, which was impacting viability. And as part of that, we discussed diversity and equality in the sector, degree apprenticeships, and whether they should live in PBSA or not. And that conversation still hasn't gone away yet. It's still going. And then we also moved on to talking about rented later living. And I don't think that's moved on either 100 episodes later. The government hasn't really got behind this regarding shining a light on empty beds in larger houses owned by older people and making moving out of those properties easier without impacting quality or negating their financial situation, and potentially moving into rented or renting out their properties either. The cost of renovations, modernisation, improvements are definitely ongoing issues that are going to impact the viability of those homes in the future. So it's a shame that hope and positivity 100 episodes ago, that I don't feel like that sector's really moved.
It hasn't, and as frustrating as it is, and we shone a light on that with Honor Barrett from Birchgrove as well with a special episode, and she is fantastic, so do go and check that one out. But yeah, it just feels like that's such an opportunity, and it's a real missed opportunity from the government to be able to showcase what it could look like when you downsize, when you sell off your property. Is there an opportunity to rent? Do you have to buy? Do you do the traditional kind of McCarthy and Stone model, or could you do a Birchgrove? And I think that's where there's definitely quite some excitement within the sector, but the capital's been quite slow to deploy there. So we've not seen a huge amount into later living, but on how the sectors are faring, I think it was really interesting to listen back to that first episode where within students, we call out that we're not convinced about the international student numbers for that year. And that kind of came true. And a lot of that, it was just from conversations that we'd all had with operators and clients and investors within the sector saying, ooh, hang on a minute, what's the latest with postgrad numbers, with Chinese numbers, Indian numbers? What are the marketplaces saying? What's every operator saying, the universities, etc.? And I think we're quite uniquely placed to have those conversations and then talk about it transparently, but not throw anyone under the bus and say, well, so-and-so told me this or whatever it might be. And that all fed the narrative that has really the thread of, running through a lot of what I say in particular, is that we've seen some presentations at various different events from some pretty big agents saying, we're going to be short of 600,000 PBSA beds by 2030, or 197,000 or 234,000. And those are the numbers that directly that I'm quoting from some of those presentations. That's not the issue that we've got. It's not just a straightforward supply-demand issue in student accommodation, just as it's not in BTR. It's an affordability issue. And I think that cuts through the whole crisis that we have in terms of the housing crisis that we seem to have. It's more of an affordability crisis. And I think that's fed a lot of the consultancy work that I've done, but also then the commentary that we've all had through the course of each of these podcasts, that there's one story, there's one narrative, but that narrative, there are specific vested interests where they get paid if that narrative flies, and it's on them to really push that as much as they can. Now, I don't think they're all, totally unscrupulous to do that. I think there's some genuine, well, let's just massage that figure a little bit and let's just take pure supply, pure demand, overall student numbers, and then that's exactly where we end up. So we need to build 600,000 PBSA. But I think the frustration that we've had is that we kept seeing it time after time at each of these events, brilliant events, and we love going to them, and we're very grateful for any media tickets. But yeah, I think that is starting to change. I can't remember the last time that I went to an event within the last year where an agent especially has stood up on stage and gone, right, guys, go and build 600,000 beds. And I'm not sure where that report is now, but I'd be really interested to go and see if that's still online.
No, and I think that is fair. That is a change that we've seen. And I think it is sad we haven't seen a change in apprenticeships
Yes.
and support for change, and that there hasn't been that growth in later living. But also, I think we spoke very briefly about COP on that episode.
Yeah.
And that's changed massively, actually, when it comes to sustainability. Like back then, it was like the most important thing. We must keep up with sustainability. We must do the thing. And Trump effect, potentially, likely, mostly, is that's gone. That conversation has disappeared. So it is amazing to see what's happened.
It will be back at UK Reef with one of our panels. But yeah, isn't that really interesting? The fact that we're just not really talking as much or in the same guise about sustainability as we were, and it's moved more from, okay, everybody needs their ESG policies and their reports and their sustainability policies absolutely nailed on, to, I suppose, being a bit more of an asset management play. And, talking about, okay, feeding into the due diligence and the acquisitions, and it's a bit more of a, expected now, I suppose, rather than, hey, this is super innovative and, maybe there's a green premium. It's now like, okay, this is, more focused on the numbers. So I think it's becoming more entrenched, but at the same time, if you're in the US or your US capital or potentially Middle Eastern capital, there's a lot less of a focus. If you're European capital or a European operator, you're still very focused on ESG. And that's really good to see because, yeah, there's absolutely zero lessons to learn from any kind of, from the Trump presidency. So hopefully sustainability will continue to grow after he's gone.
Yeah, and it might just be, like I said, that it's now embedded. We don't need to talk about it at every single event because it is happening as part of kind of day-to-day, asset management. The main topic in our first episode, though, was the scandal behind agents and fraudulent bookings in PBSA. This is probably one of your longer monologues, Dan, and that's saying something.
Is it not where the monologue started?
It really, and I think we got less polite over subsequent episodes, to be honest.
Yeah, like cut.
Started editing down a bit, but the sentiment was correct, and at the time it was really significant. It was something that needed to be called out, and again, it was just something that we were saying, just watch out for this. You might want to investigate some procedures and processes in your business to counter that. And we didn't see it again the following season. So, whether it was us calling it out or not, it was great to see that that's not something that we've had to kind of revisit over subsequent seasons.
I think that definitely helped. And yeah, after that first podcast, Em did kind of pull me aside and say, "Are you going to let them speak at all?" And so yeah, but I was so passionate about that because I was dealing with it day in, day out. I was very much in the trenches with the operators, with them saying, "We're seeing massive voids and cancellations in Glasgow, really hot location the year before because it was the post-COVID bounce." And then all of a sudden, everyone was like, "Oh God, we're now missing 20% of our cohort. Where the hell have they gone?" Did a bit of investigation through to the point where I was asking operators, right, can you tell me the IP address of that inquiry and this, that, and the other, and put two and two together and realised that there was some serious fraud going on, and some of that was marketplace driven, some of that was individual student driven, some of that was potentially criminal gangs, not to dramatise.
You did say the word triad.
I think I did. but it was on such a massive scale that every operator was kind of calling up, going, please keep talking about this, because we're going to use it as leverage to go into our conversations with marketplaces, and we're making sure that we are really hot on these processes and policies moving forward. But we could only do that with the conversations that we were having with the industry. So again, making sure that we're very focused on that confidentiality of who's saying what to whom and when. That I think that's been really important, that we're able to not have to name our sources, but also do a lot of digging there as well. That was really, for me, I was taking up a lot of my time, and I obviously wasn't getting paid for it. So at the time I was like, oh God, this is literally taking up 2 days of my life, talking to operators and then speaking to marketplaces and working out, which ones are potentially involved here, or whether it's students or whatever it might be. I just remember thinking, crikey, if I had £1 for every time someone had called me about their cancellation rate in Glasgow or Bristol or wherever else. But still, I think, we've managed to have a positive impact, I think.
Mm. And I guess based on that, I wanted to look over at some key stats from the last 2 years. So over 100 episodes, we are at nearly 30,000 downloads. And our top 5 episodes of all time, the first one is the dangerous headlines being used in PBSA, empowering women in property, differentiating BTR, and how can we offer more affordable housing. So that has continued to be listened to over the course of the last couple of years, which is really, we find it amazing that it's not just the most recent episode that gets listened to. Old episodes get pulled up as well, which is amazing.
But that also makes me really proud, because I think actually those things are the things that we're probably most passionate about in many respects. That actually the fact that that's the one that's listened to most is like, well, yeah, because that's the stuff that we want to change, we want to have an impact in. And so,
do you know what that is? That'll be agents sharing it around themselves, because those dangerous headlines, that was, I think, a Guardian article, wasn't it? That was like, hey, we need to build loads of beds, and the students are all coming, and this is amazing. And don't get me wrong, like, PBSA industry is still very strong, but it's not there where it was, where you can just build it and they will come in a tier 2, tier 3 city. And I think that's where there was some misleading headlines and numbers put out there. But empowering women in property, that was a really big section on that podcast too. So.
And I guess on that theme as well, the second most listened to episode, Dan, you took one for the team here, and you went skiing and did a podcast without Deanie and I.
Yeah, and that was great fun, I'll be honest with you.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, and that was super popular, I think, because of the people that we had involved. So it was really, really good that went down quite so well. 630 odd downloads later. But I think it's typically us, but we have people on now and again. We do various different panels, and I think that's, who knows, it might be something we do a little bit more of. There are some really good people doing the interview style podcasts, and so we kind of leave them to it for a bit, because I think we're almost probably a little bit more news and opinion.
Yeah, I think when we've had people on, it's more about kind of sharing the latest news and having opinions on it, rather than that kind of Q&A type format. So the third most popular episode so far is clearing really relevant for PBSA? What shifted this year, and long-term strategies?
Stephen from UCAS is in the green room at the moment. I think that was because clearing has become a bit more of a bump, like a speed bump, rather than this massive spike that we've previously seen. But yeah, it's really interesting to call that out in August, September, as to what that kind of looks like. And I know we're on holidays during that time, but it's an interesting time to be.
I think the role of clearing has changed massively over the years, and I think potentially that goes to show that people are kind of trying to understand clearing and trying to understand what it is now, maybe.
Yeah, completely shifted the kind of the whole cycle, really. Interestingly, the fourth most popular episode so far is one of our most recent ones, which was winning direct bookings from China, busting the myths and giving practical takeaways with expert guests Sam Raisin and Gabriel Nicklin. I think we're just going to move on.
I have nothing to say about that episode whatsoever. No, look, let me be really clear. That was a brilliant episode, and Gabe and Sam did a really good job of explaining how you can get direct bookings, because you can get plenty of bookings from marketplaces. we know where that's up to. And then that's it.
Yeah. Talk about the fifth most listened to episode. Yeah.
And the fifth most popular podcast has been The Future of PBSA and the Convergence of Shared Living. Is dynamic pricing out of control? Are you ready for Gen Alpha and having the perfect streamlined booking journey? So that's quite a meaty episode. I might go back and listen to that one, to be honest.
That is a good one. Dynamic pricing out of control. That would be lovely if it was going one way, but I think that's things are changing somewhat.
And some more stats. So interestingly, our podcast is listened to in 110 countries. Wow. And the top 6 of those are the UK, the United States, Australia, Spain, India and Ireland. So thank you very, very much to our global listeners.
Yeah, primarily the Verberflow office in India, I would have thought. But
And then cities, the top 5 cities are Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Leeds and Southwark in London for the main... a lot of people...
Oh, it must be a data centre or some kind of exchange or something that flows through.
But there are listeners in 1,426 cities.
Do you know what I find? It is amazing. Do you know what I find really funny when I have conversations with people and they're like, "Oh, I'm just off on holiday," and it was actually John Moragna from Almiro who, he was like, "Oh, I'm just off to Zanzibar on holiday," and then the next thing I see the next week, he's like, "There's a listener from Zanzibar," and it's like, "John, come on, have a break."
So maybe our listeners are just well travelled.
I think yeah. Yeah. I don't think we're inspiring the student housing industry in Zanzibar, to be totally honest.
And then the main places where the podcast is listened is mainly on Apple, 45%, followed by Spotify. And then we have Amazon Music and Overcast. And we've just started pushing out all of our podcasts to YouTube as well, because apparently people like listening to podcasts on YouTube as well.
And our web browser features as well now, thanks to our website, housedpodcast.com. Thank you very much to Jake, who is here, for helping to pull that together.
And also, we do have some of our studio episodes on our YouTube channel as well, and they're not included in those stats. So actually, it's even more. Yeah. So moving on to key themes, and obviously a visual word cloud is not going to work very well in the medium of a podcast, but we move on. And I guess what this shows is the main topics that are kind of coming out time and time again. So we've got student accommodation and BTR in big letters here. Affordability, investment, co-living, community, renting, pricing, housing, well-being, funding, demand.
Policy.
Yeah.
Crisis is quite big there.
Yeah, it is. It is. I did think that. It's the first thing I saw. I was like, oh, God.
Well, not that we're dramatic.
Well, some of us maybe.
So they're the key themes. And I think judging by the top 5 episodes, they are the key themes that are most listened to anyway. But on to more key themes. Now, although this episode is slightly unusual, but we didn't want to make it a complete throwback episode because it would be remiss of us not to touch on the latest news, views and insights. So the hot topics this week was Rachel Reeves hinting at rent freezes. Now that was kind of over and done with within about 24 hours because the likes of ARL and the NRLA were very quick to challenge this. And then Steve Reed categorically said this was not going to be introduced. Obviously, we will keep an eye on it because it has been muted up and down, but we have covered this story in relation to the Republic of Ireland and Scotland, and it was a huge relief that this news was quickly swept away, but we will keep a close eye on it because it's something that I guess we've covered a lot, and the negative impacts of what rent controls could bring.
It was just such a shambles. Yeah. I mean, none of us are surprised, unfortunately, by, the Labour government and the shambolic communications that they seem to be putting out. But for Steve Reed to have to go on Good Morning Britain or whatever, and it was Kev Redmond who was like, he's going on, like, have a listen to him. He basically had to, rebuke what Rachel Reeves had said. And it's just, I mean, there is no wonder that we're going to be so short of these 1.5 million homes that they need to build within the Parliament because they just can't talk. They can't get their act together. The policy is all over the place. Renters' rights bill comes into play tomorrow. I am fascinated as to what the hell's going to happen there. And so is everyone else. You know, a lot of the PBSA operators in particular have held off on signing any kind of contracts. And they're all going like, right, okay, it's 1st of May, quick, let's get everyone to sign. And a lot of clients that I've got with Resi are starting to think, actually, what's going to be the attrition rate here? How many cancellations are we going to get? They may have paid a deposit or whatever, but that is going to, it's just, again, there's a polite term for it. So, it's a bit of...
But we will be, continuing to cover it. It's been one of the key themes over the last 100 episodes. We also read this week that Birmingham University are bringing in the 2-day degree, essentially a commitment on a number of courses that students will only need to be on campus for 2 consecutive days a week to enable them to have jobs, concentrate on caring responsibilities and save money. However, we have raised time and time again is how does that impact accommodation if other universities follow suit even more than we're currently seeing?
I don't know. I think I'd love to have a chat with Tim about that, actually. We obviously had Tim on a podcast after the Student Accommodation Conference and Awards, wasn't it? Gosh, that was a tough morning. but Tim was great. He barely had a voice. So he oversees the accommodation at University of Birmingham with Anita. And I just wonder, is there going to be... Because it fits in quite nicely with the episode that we did with Lavanda as well recently. Was that the last episode? Yeah. I think the last episode, or anyway, Search Lavanda special episode, where I think people are going to start looking properly at flexibility and that hybrid model of having a certain percentage of their rooms on a flexible basis, because you're going to need to. If you're doing, but which days is it that people are actually going to need to stay? Is there going to be one specific day, in which case are you just holding a room for 1 day a week? And then how is that going to work? I just don't know. So really be very interested to have a chat with Tim and Anita and see where that's up to.
Yeah, and it just is, I guess my worry is it short-termism in the sense of we need to do something now to get people back into university and making it affordable for them and flexible, which is all great, but it's the long-term impact. And I think I've said this many times, my concern is I think it's a real shame if people aren't going away to study and moving out of home. And if we're making it easier for them, we're making that distance from doing that even bigger and greater. And then it becomes just what you do. And maybe that's the right thing, maybe that's the wrong thing. But I think in a world where we probably do need to give the next generation a bit more leash to go and just be themselves and learn about themselves and find themselves, that's the only way to do that. So I just worry that it's short-termism to support a university now. In the long term, is that actually going to support a university?
I think the good news is that with University of Birmingham, they're doing it from a position of strength. So they're not sort of a tier 2, tier 3 university like, oh God, how do we make the numbers stack up? They're thinking, how can we innovate? What does this look like? Is this something that we could actually make work? So I think that's a really positive sign. But yeah, with more modularity in the way that we do the courses, what's that going to look like? Are there going to be modules where you can just study at home and then 6 weeks you do that and then 6 weeks you go in and maybe live at a certain accommodation? Does that make it more transient? What do you get from the experience? We've got all of that to think about, but the universities should be that testing ground. And I think we've got some that are right at the forefront of that. They're the canaries in the coal mine. They're testing it. They're innovating systems and structure and, that modularity and the 2-year courses, whatever it might be. And they're already thinking about degree apprenticeships and things. I think the more we can see the positive case studies from that, the better. But either way, they just have to share their learnings. I've no doubt, Tim and the team at University of Birmingham will. But like I said, good that that's happening from a position of strength and that they're the ones really kind of pioneering it rather than it being, oh, no, I won't name a university, but a university that is struggling.
I think the other thing is that there is a bigger impact. The less people that are living on campus, the less secondary spend on F&B, the less people that will be in societies, the less students that will be playing sport, and then the less students that will potentially stay retained in a city after their degree as graduates, as we've seen in the past. So that could have a really big impact, kind of ongoing. Like you said, it's short-termism, really. It definitely fixes a problem right now of affordability and applications. but it could have a longer term impact, not to mention the social life, the community, the life skills, etc. This week, we also digested the UK Youth Poll from the John Smith Centre, which proved to be quite depressing reading. The top issues facing young people in the UK are inflation and the cost of living, housing affordability, healthcare and jobs and job security. And 36% said they don't think a university degree is worth the cost. 36% said the university degree is worth the cost. Therefore, the vast majority don't. The students that were surveyed said they are getting more worried about their financial plight and now quite significantly believe their lives will be worse than the generation before them. A lot of information in the report, so I'm sorry that I just picked out the really, really depressing headlines there. It was sobering reading, wasn't it?
I don't envy anyone making that decision as to whether university is worth it at the moment. But I think I read a really good article by Paddy Allen this morning, and I think we are moving towards, we're going to be polarised. We're either going to be specialists in AI-protected degrees, effectively. I don't know what that kind of degree is, to be honest, because AI is touching almost everything. Or we're effectively going to have generalists who understand, like I did French and politics, not because I wanted to be a French politician. I just wanted to go to university. I wanted the life experience. I wanted to live in France. And I think, that was ultimately where I became an adult, and I think that was really important for me personally, less so the academics of it all. And I think that's what's going to happen in an era of AI where the world of work is so disrupted. I think people are going to have to focus on their life experience, and you may just have to invest in that and understand that there might not be some tangible outcomes to this. Your graduate outcome may change. It might not be that you can walk away and go, I've got £10,000 more than I would have done if I'd have done a degree apprenticeship or whatever it might be, but you will have that life experience. And so much of that is about living away at university, getting out from living with your parents or whoever, and actually standing on your own 2 feet. And I had that, and I had the opportunity to stay local. I could have gone to Canterbury, Christchurch or Kent or whatever. And I chose to go a little bit further afield, just far enough so that I wouldn't be tempted to go home every weekend. And I think that's where we're almost back there now, where the trouble is it's so much more expensive. So how do you reconcile that? I don't have the answers. None of us do. But I do understand this stat. 36% said a degree is worth the cost. That's pretty damning, and is something that we definitely need to change. And I don't think the universities are really being proactive enough as a whole. That being said, University of Birmingham coming out with a 2-year degree, and others have trialled it as well, and we've seen that. And I think that is something that we'll see more of, because my final year at uni, I think I had 3.5 hours of lectures or seminars, and I think I probably went to 0 of them. So did I need to be away? No, probably not. But I think there's a way that we can condense it a little bit.
It comes down to marketing again, doesn't it? I think in a sense, or communication, that actually we've got to show the value, and we've got to show the value of actually going to university is more than just a degree. And I think we've lost that, and I think we are at high risk of losing that for a whole generation. And that's my fear. Is that actually once you lose it for a generation, you then got to work twice as hard to get it back, because it's not what your generation before went to you. And I agree. I think that report was really difficult reading, because the younger generation should be full of hope and ambition and strive and wanting to go and make the world a better place. And they don't have that. And that's because everything is hard for them every step of the way. It's hard to go off to university and change your outcomes. It's hard to get on the housing ladder. Everything that they've been told of what can happen is a struggle. And I think that's where the government have really got to try and, not that they're going to, we've got to try and make things different to get hope back into people's lives, because that's really quite sad. So let's change the subject.
Yeah,
that's quite
on
depressing.
to happier things. So we're at the end of season 6 with our 100th episode. What about season 7? What can we expect?
Oh, don't look at me. I'm the least planned person in this room.
I think we wanted to put it out there to our audience. We have a live audience here, but we have many listeners who are not here today as well. And we'd love to hear what you think about it. We have our classic news, views and insights weekly podcast that we love doing and will happily carry on doing. We've thrown in the odd kind of special feature episode with some interviews and some insights from key leaders in the sector, which again, happy to do more of. A few people have suggested Housed on Tour. Before the podcast, it started to get a little bit carried away with the talk of buses and drones and and all sorts. Yeah, that was mainly Gareth. So we had to have a pretty big sponsor to enable us to do that. So really. We'd love some feedback about what people want more of, less of. We are going to be doing a special event episode. So next week we're going to be at the ARL Tech Conference and the LD Student Accommodation Conference, and Deanie was at the Inner Circle event yesterday, so we're going to be doing an event special. And then we've got 3 live podcasts at UK Reef that we'll be putting out as well. And then who knows? So please give us some feedback.
We also have a couple of questions from the audience. I'm conscious of time, to be fair, but we've got a couple of questions from the audience. We have, what does our crystal ball say about the resi market in the future? And are we ever going to build enough houses? So that's 2 to start with. And we got Tim Stephen from Vermiflow collecting these questions. What are your thoughts there?
No, I don't think we're going to have enough houses because, and part of the reason that we do this and part of the reason that we have our shared living summit at UK Reef is to shine the light on the shared rented living sectors. And I don't think that the government or the housing department can do this on buying, houses for sale or affordable houses on their own. I think rental product has to come into it, and we're not seeing enough support of that. So, I don't think that they'll hit it by the target that they set anyway. I think that's absolutely ludicrous, but it would be nice for it to go more in the right direction. I think some of these big towns that have been announced, the new towns, I think is really, really positive, and they are, made of mixed tenure. So, but that's not enough to hit the targets.
I think more of the same. I don't think anything's going to massively change. And I asked this question at the Inner Circle event last night, is what is the one thing we could do around affordability? And I think the answer is that so many different things have got to shift and change around, investment metrics, cost of supply. And unless something's going to move, and nothing in the global sphere is moving in the right direction. So
I agree. I can't see the government getting their act together, getting out of their silos and actually having a coordinated approach to any kind of policy with regards to that. And the frustration that we've seen from the ARL and from RE UK, the new body that was the BPF, is really tangible now. I watched Brendan Geraghty speak the other day at the UK Reef dinner, actually, that Matt invited us to. And he's so passionate about getting the rental sector involved in some of these decisions, because we're not seeing the government bring in BTR and, single family housing. It's just talking about what homes should we build? Should we go to Persimmon or Redrow? I don't even know if they exist anymore, those 2 companies. But it's just focusing on the house builders, and that's what has to change. I think that's the most frustrating thing that I see. We're not getting listened to. The industry, the rental living sector, is just not being listened to. And so we're not forming part of a lot of the figures, and therefore we're not a part of the solution. And so if we're not going to build houses to sell, what's the point in listening to us? And it's all falling on deaf ears.
Regarding the crystal ball, one thing that I think is happening, I guess if we're talking about the next 100 episodes, which is probably another 2 years, we are starting to hear talk of, particularly in PBSA and BTR, from developers really wanting to create that affordable product. We've not seen it yet, but we're not being told no anymore. So is anything going to fundamentally, it's not going to come out of the ground in the next 2 years, but are we going to start to see something? I would really like to think so, because that has definitely shifted. We're hearing more yeses than nos now. Okay, well, that's a wrap on our 100th episode, and we're off now to have some cake and enjoy a glass of bubbly or two. But as I said, we will be back for some special episodes, and then we'll be covering whatever you want us to cover in the summer months and September onwards. But in the meantime, some heartfelt thank yous to Joe and Kerry in our team for organising us and tirelessly promoting the podcast, to Gareth, our ever-patient producer, Jake for creating the visual brand identity that has literally taken over a life of its own with UK Reef. It's phenomenal. And the sponsors and partners over the last 100 episodes, some of which are My Student Halls, Utopia, Wash Station, The E-Word, Howard Kennedy, Fusion, the Class Foundation, Lavanda, Tong, Viva City and Howden. Massive apologies if we've missed anyone off. But, thank you to all of our listeners as well. And we'll look forward to the next 100 episodes.